Froswa Booker Drew, and I am going to share my fearless story with you, one of triumph and tragedy. So in 2005, I was working at a place that I just adored. Had a chance to build programs in a really low-income community and work to improve the lives of children and their families. And so at that time, I was working really hard, pushing myself probably a little bit harder than I should have, and working, 6 days a week. Not because I was forced to, but because I really enjoyed the work and wanted to make a difference. And I remember one morning calling a friend of mine who was a nurse practitioner and saying to her, I'm not feeling good. I woke up, I could hardly breathe. And so I was struggling to get out of bed. I'd been sniffling and coughing and just feeling really bad. But I think what I did was just push through it. And so she said, come on in. Let me see what's going on. It took me forever to get dressed and to get to her office. But once there, she had diagnosed me with having pneumonia. What was crazy was at the same time that I got diagnosed, my father had a cold and he wasn't feeling well. He too went to the doctor, found out that he had pneumonia. What was very interesting about that situation was after 2 months of work, I got better, but my dad didn't. And so that 2 months I did not realize was going to be a preparation time for what was to come. And so the first 2 weeks I was getting cards, people were calling, checking on me to see how I was doing. And after that time, I think it was week 3, that it became real serious for me to begin to use that time to think about purpose and really connecting to my faith and connecting to prayer. And I had no idea what that time was about. I just thought it was really a place for me to get grounded and to refocus. And so I decided to leave my job. I interviewed, got another position in a totally different field. And my dad, he too went back to work, but wasn't doing well, kept coughing, not feeling well. And finally, we went to the doctor in June, and we discovered that what we thought was pneumonia was actually cancer. His entire chest was lined with nodules, and so the doctor really tried to do some aggressive treatments, chemo, tried a pill, nothing worked. And so Dad just continued to decline, but for me it was, let's just keep believing for the best and, pushing treatments, even though it was really hard on him. And he would get okay a couple of days after the chemo and then have to go right back into it. And it was difficult to see someone who was this tall, big, vibrant man that for all my life was just like larger than life, really losing weight and declining. And so I remember when he was in the hospital, my mother had told me, this isn't good. And I remember thinking, well, he's going to be fine. And she took me outside and pointed to the ward that he was on and all the different doors of people. And she said, that person just passed away. That person just passed away. And even though she was trying to give me the reality check, I still believed he was going to be fine. And so I'd started this new job. I was getting ready to fly off to Minneapolis for a conference. And before that, Hurricane Katrina had come through Louisiana. That's where my family's from. And when Katrina came through, my uncle had passed away as well. But because of all the challenges, it was so much, I won't even go into it. My dad was like, just go to work. We'll deal with this situation. When you come back, we'll handle it. Strangely enough, I was getting ready to go to the airport. And my mom called me and said they were going to resuscitate my dad. They were doing that at the time. So I'm thinking, I'll just, go home, see about Dad, and then catch a flight back to catch the second leg of work, because I was going to leave Minneapolis and go to Tampa. Got my daughter situated with a friend, and then we started driving from Texas to Louisiana. Halfway there, we found out my dad had passed away. And in the midst of that, I mentioned earlier about my uncle, and so we ended up having my uncle's wake at 6 o'clock on Friday and Dad's at 7 on Friday, the same day. And it was just such an experience. And I remember I was getting ready for the funeral, and and flipped to a scripture that reminded me that as a hen carries her chicks and covers her chicks, that God does the same. And for me, it was so powerful because in the midst of all this going on, I didn't recognize that the pneumonia I had struggled with was really a time to prepare me for what was to come. And so we're at the cemetery, and a friend of mine walks up to me and whispers and says, "Wow, this is a gold mine." And I remember thinking, what are you talking about? It's the cemetery. And they continue to say, look at all these buried dreams that never came to pass, never came to fruition. Is that going to be you? And I think that was really the catalyst of getting me to think about what I wanted my life to look like. I had thought about going back to school for years, just didn't. I had a number of friends who were going, you need to go back to school and get your PhD. And I thought, I don't have time to do this. But I started the process a few years later. Ended up at 39, almost 40 years old, going back to school to work on a PhD, and graduated 4 years later, really almost 4 years later. I'd written a book while working on my dissertation, finished the dissertation. I was working full-time with a family, raising a daughter, and juggling all those things. But I think what that experience taught me with my dad was, despite the tragedies that we go through in life, there are opportunities for you to see possibility. And for me, it was an opportunity to really begin to look at not just the possibilities my dad had that he never realized. I think my dad could have been the next Emerald. He was such an amazing chef. But it was an opportunity for me to look at what he didn't accomplish. Here's an opportunity for me to take the time and begin to really pursue my dreams and my interest in life. And so finished that. And it's been a year since I completed the PhD, and I'm just elated about, even that was a difficult experience, but going through the really difficult experiences that push you and help you really see what you're made of. And I think without having my faith and family and friends, I don't think I'd have the future that I've been able to have at this point, and really experience life in a very full and different way. So one of the questions I was asked about being a fearless woman was this question about what motivates you. I think it's those F's. It's family. It's friends. It's the ideal of future possibilities. I really get motivated about being able to make a difference and help people and making their lives better. When I wrote the book, the first book, which was Rules of Engagement, Making Connections Last, the goal of that for me was helping women listen to their stories, because I think sometimes we want to build relationships, but we don't really think about the ways in which we connect to people, and that our stories really help or hinder us in making the connections that we want. So before we think about how do we build those relationships, I think it's important to think about your own narrative. While I was in school, I got intrigued with this idea, two things actually. This idea of narrative identity, that our identities are tied into the stories that we tell about ourselves. But I also got intrigued with this idea of social capital and how people build relationships with each other and build their networks. And so how does your identity really begin to shape the relationships because of the stories? And so for me, that motivates me, and is listening not only to my own story, but also listen to the stories of other women and helping women who typically wouldn't have relationships with one another to come together and learn their stories and see not just the differences, but the commonalities that we share. When I was doing my research group for my dissertation, I brought all these very diverse women together. And despite their differences in religion and age and occupation, what I noticed was that when they told their stories, they actually had more in common. Even though I might not be able to identify with someone who has gone through an abusive relationship, I do know what it's like to be in pain and what it feels like to, want to love and not be able to have the love the way that you feel that you need or deserve it. And so there's some things that connect us to one another, and we don't get the chance to do that until we're in community and we get to share. And so, again, all of those things, I think, contribute to what motivates me. In addition to just having an amazing 15-year-old daughter, she motivates me tremendously to think about how I stay connected to her as a parent, and really helping her think about what her future and her focus will be for her life. I don't want her to be just like me. I really look forward to watching her develop into, and I love watching her develop into who she's becoming as a young woman, and that's been exciting to do. Another question that I was asked about, and being, a fearless woman, what's my mantra? What do I live by? I think I live by the ideal of doing to others as you'd have them do unto you. I think it's so important that you treat people the way you want to be treated. And so, a lot of people say, I want to be loved. I think if you want to be loved, then you have to be a person who gives love. And so I'm really mindful about the way that I treat people and try to give and extend love and understanding to others, but also recognizing that I have to do that for myself. And fill myself with those things so that I have something to give to other people, to share with them. So I think that's a big piece. And then I think the other question is advice. I had to look on my notes, but I think the last question is, what advice would I give to others? Know your story. Figure out what it is that motivates you, what makes you happy, what concerns you, what makes you sad, what bothers you, what are your triggers. I think it's really important because in the world that we live in, it's so easy to want to be someone else. People want to look like Kim Kardashian or, look like all these different celebrities that exist. And people don't recognize their own uniqueness and what exists. And so you spend so much time trying to be someone else that you neglect to be the wonderful person that you were created to be. So learn your story, know who you are, and understand how that story either helps you connect to people or hinders your connection to others. I think the other advice that I would give to women is, how do you create community? How do you begin to build relationships with other people that support you? I have found that in the most difficult situations that I've been in, it is really because I've had a community of people that love me and supported me and helped me get through. And it's not to say that even with the wonderful things that have happened since the tragedy with, losing my father and my uncle, and since then aunts and father-in-laws and mother-in-law. I mean, it's just been an onslaught of loss. And even in the midst of those things, I don't think I could have dealt with it without having a good community of family and my husband and my friends as a support system, and my mother. And I mean, I've been very fortunate to have that, but I also think that in order to have it, you have to sow into that and be available to others so that you can have those deposits that you place really become a bank for you later on. And then I think the other thing is faith. For me, I think it's very important for you to have something to believe in and have hope. And for a lot of people in a world with all the tragedies and misunderstandings that we have about others, I think it's very important to have something that you believe in that's greater than you. And my faith is something that I treasure, and I don't think I could live in the world without having the faith system and the family and the support system, because all those things for me have helped me to focus. And so if you don't have those things to support you, I think it makes it very difficult to be able to focus and make things happen in the way that you want to. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to share a piece of my very interesting story, and thank you for allowing me to be one of the fearless women that you honor through this broadcast. It is an amazing opportunity, and I hope that what I've been able to share will inspire and encourage other women to tell their stories, to connect to others, and to build community so that we can make a difference and change this world. And it doesn't have to be something that's, in the news, but every little thing that we do to connect to others and to make ourselves better so that we can create a future for those that are behind us that's better than what we've inherited, I think makes all the difference in the world. So thanks again and Happy New Year. Bye-bye.